So, the latest Bleach chapter has got fans understandably pretty excited about the future of the series for a whole number of reasons. Number one, of course, is the fact that we finally do actually have canon Bleach manga content again after what has felt like an age, and is honestly not something I ever thought we would get. Secondly, that content seems like it could reasonably be expanded into a whole story arc and seems like something we might actually get. And thirdly, that story arc seems like it's going to heavily involve the as of yet very mysterious and unknown region of Hell. That's already a lot to get very excited about. However, I think the one thing that people are most excited about, the one thing I've seen talked about the most online regarding speculation, is the potential return of dead characters in the series. And this, of course, comes about due to the surprise resurrection of a fan-favourite villain in Szayelaporro Grans, the 8th Espada, who emerges from Hell in this new chapter a twisted and changed man. But also the massive bombshell reveal that previously deceased captains of the Soul Society, presumably dating back to ancient times, have all been sent to Hell on behalf of a pretty massive oversight on the Gotei's behalf. And so with this knowledge in mind, it's not hard to imagine that Hell might be filled with loads of fan-favourite characters, many of whom we thought we had seen the last of in the Bleach canon manga. But also this presents Kubo a unique opportunity to finally bring in some of those disparate characters who have made an impact on fans, but perhaps only appeared in the supplementary material. In this video, I've put together a list of 10 characters I would love to see make an appearance in a potential Bleach Hell arc, returning from Hell, whether they are previous villains, previous good guys. There's a bit of a mixture here of all of them, but regardless, I would love to see some, and there are some that I think are more likely than others as well. Before we begin, however, guys, thank you so much for smashing that milestone of 75k. I would really appreciate if you haven't hit subscribe yet to make sure you do that right now. You're in the perfect place for Bleach content just like this every single week, and every subscription obviously really helps support the channel and push us towards that next goal of 100 grand, which is still unfathomable to say. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, because it really does help, give it more exposure on the platform and push it out to more Bleach fans who might not normally get a chance to see it. And also, finally, if you do want to support the channel a little bit more, we do now have a Patreon as well, where you can support me there for as little as $1 a month, and that nets you things like early access to videos. And of course, a massive thank you goes out to everyone who has already become a patron there. I really appreciate your support, and I genuinely, it means so much to me, so thank you. So, before we begin our video of the top 10 characters I would love to see come alive again in a potential Bleach Hell arc, characters I'm expecting to be making up the denizens of that realm, there is a bit of an elephant in the room I want to address, and I guess these could kind of be considered honourable mentions. They come under the same umbrella. And that is two former Espada. The second Espada, the tyrant king of skulls, Baragon Luisenbahn, and the immeasurably popular fan favourite Ulquiorra, whose return would be an order of magnitude the likes of which we probably haven't seen, and I don't think I'm overstating that. Now, both of these characters died in the Arrancar arc, and certainly Baragon is an evil tyrant, a despot who, to be honest, deserves a spot in Hell. He's a pretty nasty guy. Ulquiorra is a little bit harder to place whether he actually deserves a spot in Hell or not. He's obviously very emotionless, very nihilistic, and therefore his actions don't necessarily come from a place of malice. He is more akin to a statuesque robot or something like that, who maybe doesn't really quite know that what he is doing is, evil. And I think fans would obviously love to see Ulquiorra again. His death in the Arrancar arc at the end of the Lust mini arc is still perhaps one of the most memorable and impactful moments in the series. And I think that enough time has passed where bringing him back wouldn't cheapen that. It would just be a great fan service moment for long-standing fans of the series. And I personally would love to see Baragon again. I think that would be amazing. I think it would be so cool to see him. He's one of my favourite Espada. They both are. But what's the reason for them being honourable mentions when there are actual Espada on this list? Well, it's difficult to say what happened to them when they died. Baragan is killed by his own power, his Respirar ability, whereas Ulquiorra, I'm pretty sure the final hit that gets him and actually finishes him off is a Sero as opposed to a Zanpakuto toe strike. And so what that means is that neither of them were actually cleansed by a Zanpakuto toe. That's what happens when a Shinigami kills a Hollow. They cleanse them of their crimes and allow them to move on. And clearly in some Hollows cases, like Szayelaporro, they had committed probably evil deeds as humans and have ended up in hell. But Baragan and Ulquiorra, it's so hard to know exactly what the kind of criteria is for a soul moving on. It's hopefully something that will be fleshed out in future chapters if and when we get them. But I do think these two fan-favourite characters, particularly Ulquiorra, while it would be amazing to see them again, I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think they will have fallen into that cycle of rebirth. It's possible they might have done, but I'm pretty sure it, generally speaking, has to be a Zanpakuto toe that cleanses you and then you either go to Soul Society or Hell, personality depending, basically. So while I'd love to see these two characters, they can only really make it onto this part of the list because I'm not confident they would have even gone to Hell, but if they are there, I'd love to see them. And so kicking this list off properly with the number 10 spot, this one in my opinion is a pretty obvious pick, I think, and some of these are more obvious than others. I think some of them are much more likely than others as well. And this first one is canonically, as far as volumes 1 to 74, the only character to have actually gone to Hell in the series that we actually got to witness, and that is the Hollow Shrieker. Now, comparatively with the rest of the characters on this list, Shrieker is positively a no-name, pretty low-tier bad guy. But as I mentioned, he is still the only character we have ever seen actually be dragged into Hell for their crimes. And yes, it happened right at the start of the series, but Shrieker provided us with an intriguing window into this part of the series. So if Bleach really is delving deep into Hell, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring Shrieker back in some form. Because he's really not going to be that powerful, he has been pretty heavily outclassed since Volume 2. I don't expect him to be back in any major way, but it would be a nice little nod to pretty old school fans of the series, I think. And obviously in the non-canon movie Hellverse, Shrieker does show up in a manner similar to what I'm expecting here. Mostly just as a nod to fans. And I really do think that the person who basically spearheaded Hell's introduction in Bleach probably deserves to show up in an arc about Hell. Coming in at number 9, we have another Hollow, and again, I think this one is a pretty self-explanatory and obvious choice, and that's Espada number 9, Aronniero Ararueri. And the main reason for him being on here, again, is obvious. Now, with the Bleach movie, the Hellverse movie, there was a tie-in promotional manga chapter, as I have been over before, that featured both Szayelaporro and Aronniero falling into Hell. Now, while I don't consider that tie-in manga chapter to be canon, Kubo clearly likes the idea of Szayelaporro falling to Hell after being killed, and so you have to assume he feels the same way still about Aronniero. It makes total sense to see this guy again if Kubo himself believes them to have both suffered the same fate. I'd love to see Aronniero again. I've always thought he's a really cool character, one of these characters with an awesome, intriguing design that was just a victim of not finding out anything about him, unfortunately. So it would be really cool to see him again. And he hasn't been seen since like volume 30 after his death at the hands of Rukia, so I'd absolutely love that. Now, our 8th place spot character, there is virtually nothing to say about this guy, and that's the 10th Kenpachi Kiganjo. Kiganjo is a pretty weird character in that he's kind of fairly important. He is the Kenpachi that Zaraki killed to get that title, which is, fairly major considering Zaraki is such a huge character in Bleach. Kiganjo, however, has basically never really been seen. He was on a promotional colour page for the Turn Back the Pendulum arc that kind of showed off the rest of the vice captains and stuff like that. I love that picture, it's great. You see characters like Chikane Iba, for instance, but Kiganjo is on there. And his Zanpakuto toe, from what you can just about make out, is actually pretty cool looking. I've always thought the dude kind of just looked like a fat yami personally, but I would still love to see him. The reason he is here, and not sharing a spot with certain other characters later on down the line, is that Kiganjo's canonicity is non-negotiable. Like, he has actually appeared in the canon manga of Bleach. So he effectively already exists in this universe. In volumes 1 to 74, Kiganjo is there. Like I said, he's already on that colour page for Turn Back the Pendulum, but even clearer than that, he actually appears for like a single panel in the Thousand Year Blood War arc in a little flashback just before Kenpachi finishes off Unohana. So Kiganjo, I'd love to see him. We know virtually nothing about him other than he's apparently very lazy and he was killed in a single hit by Zaraki, so how strong actually is this guy? It's kind of hard to say. But I'm already thinking, like, if I were in the business of writing fan fiction, which in some ways I kind of am with some of these comics and stuff, I would love to see Kenpachi and Unohana. It's a bit confusing calling him Kenpachi in this context. Zaraki and Unohana teaming up against the Hell Kenpachis. That would be awesome. Or Kenpachi Zaraki going against all of them, because obviously Unohana is in Hell as well. Regardless, Kiganjo, I'd love to see him here, and presumably he is, so I think that would make a lot of sense. Now, I said I always thought Kiganjo kind of just looked like a fat version of Yami. And speaking of that character, at number 7 we have the 10th or 0 Espada, Yami Largo. And Yami's just another one of these characters who is a total, just a monster. He's a horrible person in the manga. Very prominent villain in the Arrancar arc, as I mentioned in my video about Yami. He is a major bad guy, albeit a pretty unpopular one. He does play a pretty huge role in that storyline, so I think it would be still pretty cool to see him here, twisted and changed by Hell, much in the same way as Szayelaporro has been. Just remembered I forgot to mention, Aranjero could potentially have an amazing design here, like something truly eldritch and like Lovecraftian. I think that would be so cool. But back to Yami, in his like second release or whatever it was, his like era anger transformation, he already kind of looked a little bit devilish with the major horns going on and stuff like that. So I think Yami would work really well here. If Kubo decides to make the Denizens of Hell this kind of villainous organization, they're going to need some bruiser characters, and Yami would fit the bill perfectly there. He's obviously killed by Zanpakuto, Byakuya, and Zaraki at the end of the Arrancar arc, so he could easily be here, especially if he was as nasty in life as he is now. And speaking of pretty nasty Espada, coming in at number 6, we have the 5th Espada, Noitra Jiruga. Again, very similar reasons to Yami, basically, why I could expect to see him here. If Szayelaporro is in Hell, I could easily see Noitra there. They are in many ways just as bad as each other for slightly different reasons, but they are both despicable beings at the end of the day. Noitra is, very kind of sexist, very depraved, very morally questionable in certain scenes and the way he acts. And he's just a pretty, like I said, a pretty nasty guy all round. The difference is, compared to Yami, Noitra, and compared to Aranjero, Noitra is pretty popular among fans, and I think that would be a pretty big win on Kubo's part to bring him back. Again, Noitra is a character we haven't really seen since like volume 35 or something like that. So bringing back some of these old Espada would be kind of just really awesome. In some ways, I feel like the impact of Szayelaporro was lessened ever so slightly because he actually appears in the Thousand Year Blood War arc. But I think people would love to see Noitra again, and I absolutely could see him here. And you just know that Kubo would do some amazing design with Santa Teresa here in Hell. I think he would work really well. And again, in his Resurrection, he has horns, so he's already ready made for Hell. Now, the top 5 is where things become a little less clear-cut, a little less obvious, in my opinion, as to whether or not they would actually end up in Hell for a variety of reasons. And the first character we're going to talk about, spot number 5, is actually the former captain of the 9th Division Kaname Tosen. Now, Tosen was never the most popular villain in Bleach. He was always basically outshined by both Aizen and Gin, as far as that trio of bad guy goes. But I would actually love to see Tosen come back. I always thought he was pretty fascinating in his own right. Really awesome design. And his fight with Komamura and Hisagi remains one of my favourites to this day. The question that throws this up in the air is that would the Gotei 13 have performed the ritual rites for Tozen? Because he is a traitor at the end of the day. It's very hard to say exactly what their kind of stance on that would be. At the end of the day, Tozen's Reiatsu, he is a captain, he has massive Reiatsu, especially after becoming essentially a holofied Shinigami. Tozen's Reiatsu can't just be left to sit. You know, they explicitly say that it's done because that would be a problem for the Soul Society, so I can imagine them doing it. And also, he made peace with Komamura and Hisagi just before dying. I could see them pushing for some kind of funeral rites to be done for Tozen after his death. Many of these characters are kind of considered to be victims of Aizen at the end of the day and his machinations. So maybe not under Yamamoto, but I could potentially see someone like Kyoraku doing this, who's perhaps a little more lenient or a little more loose when it comes to traditions in Soul Society. I could perhaps see him giving Tozen one. But regardless, I'd love to see it. Tozen's duality, the fact that he is a holified Shinigami, also brings up some interesting questions. Like, does he go to hell and start to transform in the same way Szayelaporro did? If we did see Tozen in hell, would he look more like his resurrection than his normal self? I think there's a lot of cool questions that can be asked here, and I'd like to see Tozen come back. Now, coming in at number 4, and we have our first characters who I personally consider to be non-canon. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, but in my eyes, this actually offers Kubo a wonderful opportunity to properly give them an introduction into the Bleach manga. And that, of course, is the 7th Kenpachi, Kenpachi Kuruyashiki, and the 8th Kenpachi, Azashiro Soya, both of whom I believe appear in Spirits Are Forever With You, the light novel. Now, again, like I said, their fates in the books don't really matter too much because Kubo can kind of wipe the slate clean with these guys if he wants to. And I'd love to see them. He already has 2 ready-made Kenpachi ready to go. If he wants to make them appear in the manga, he can do, with minimal introduction, just enough for the people who haven't read the light novels to know that these guys are former Kenpachi. And let's face it, people would love to see more from the Kenpachi line. If you do just consider 1 to 74 and this new chapter to be canon, we only know 3 Kenpachi in the history of the Soul Society. So I would always welcome seeing these guys in the actual manga itself. I think it would be awesome to see them both there. Kuruyashiki, he never grew on me that much. He kind of just looks like Ginjo. The design feels a bit slapdash to me. Azashiro, on the other hand, I think has an awesome design, and I'd love to see him in the actual manga itself. Like I said, their fates, whatever happened to them in the light novels, whatever you think about these characters, it technically doesn't matter. Kubo can do whatever he likes. He can say that, both of them died at some indiscriminate point that has nothing to do with anything that happened here. Really, it doesn't matter. It would just be really cool to see them both. Like I said, maybe get some Kenpachi battle royale going on. Although if Azashiro keeps the same powers he has in the light novel, he's incredibly broken. But then most of the Kenpachi are incredibly broken so far. So I have a feeling Kiganjo might pull the short straw there. But regardless, I'd love to see both of these guys show up. And I think an arc that can potentially bring back deceased captains is the perfect and most natural way to organically introduce them into the manga itself. Now, number 3, I'm honestly kind of cheating a little bit with this spot because it's not just a single character, but a group of characters that I really have no idea about, and that is the Stern Ritter. Now, we've already established that Shinigami have been going to hell. We've already established that Espada have been going to hell. I want me some Quincy's. I love the Quincy's. I don't want them to just be completely forgotten about and washed aside in whatever we get here. There's no denying that some of these guys are pretty horrible. I would say 50% of the Stern Ritter at least probably deserve to go to hell. But we really don't know an awful lot about what happens to them as far as the cycle of rebirth goes, because presumably them being Quincy means that the vast majority of them were actually human. However, some of them are at least 2,000 years old, and everything gets very confusing at this point. But, you know, imagine seeing, like, Asnot in Hell with some incredible Hell design going on. That would be phenomenal. And he probably deserves it. He's a pretty nasty guy. Sick, twisted sense of humour, clearly took pleasure in disemboweling Byakuya. I think he could be there. I just don't know the logistics behind it. Personally, I think Tsukishima should have gone to hell for the crimes he committed as a human, but he didn't. He went to Soul Society. So, did the Sternritter end up in Soul Society? I know for a fact, obviously, we find out in the chapter Godlike You, that when a Sternritter dies, the piece of their soul that was kind of embellished and given power by having a letter engraved in it returns to Yhwach. But after his death, what happens to these guys? Are they forever trapped in limbo? I have absolutely no idea. I would love to see some of them show up here, though. It'd be so great. And would just ensure that they basically haven't been forgotten in the manga entirely. And coming in at number 2 on this list, in my opinion at least, is the biggest fan favourite character with the biggest chance of showing up here. And that is, of course, the former captain of the 3rd Division, Gin Ichimaru. Now, Gin hasn't been around in the canon manga for a very long time. Admittedly, he shows up in the Everything But the Rain flashback alongside Tozen, but he is killed by Aizen at the end of the Irankar arc. And for the longest time, you know, his motivation seemed very shady, and it turned out that actually everything he did was in service of taking revenge on Aizen for what he did to Rangiku when they were children some time ago. But of course, this doesn't absolve Gin of all of his sins. I think regardless of what you think of his mission, the fact that he is doing everything for his childhood friend is noble, but there's no denying he himself is a snake-like, conniving, and pretty horrible person. You know, he bifurcates Hiyori, he seems to take real pleasure in tormenting Rukia for absolutely no reason in the Soul Society arc, so he's definitely morally questionable in and of it himself. However, again, much like Tosen, I could see him being given this ritual, A, because he has immense spiritual pressure and it can't just be left to fester, and B, because his heroics, the fact that he did turn on Aizen, could quite have easily been mentioned to somebody at some point. Now, I feel like in some kind of supplementary material, this was brought up, but honestly I can't actually remember. So if you do know in the comments, please let me know. I can't remember if Matsumoto told someone about Gin's efforts or if she kept it under the rug. But regardless, again, the beauty of this arc is that Kubo has essentially the freedom to do whatever he wants. If he thinks that the Gotei kind of heard what Gin did and they were like, all right, we'll give him the festival, we'll at least do that for him. It means he's now in hell, and it means we can definitely see him in the future. And I genuinely think Gin coming back would be crazy. I think fans would just lose it. They would lose it. That's pretty much an Ulquiorra level character returning. So while I don't think characters should come back just because of fan service, I think it would be potentially really nice for Gin and Rangiku to have one kind of final conversation. And I think, again, he could look amazing in Hell. I'm really excited to potentially see the Hell captains in general. I think Kubo's probably going to go crazy with their designs. I hope he does anyway. And that's going to be really exciting. And then number 1 on this list, again, is maybe a bit of a cheat because it is more than one character. But it is one of the biggest kind of questions and sticking points fans of Bleach have had for a very long time. And using the characters in this way, bringing them back as denizens of Hell, would answer those questions in one fell swoop. And of course I'm talking about the original Gotei 13. The original set of captains who worked alongside Yamamoto and Unohana and acted like a gang of merciless thugs who Yhwach called just this unstoppable unit that he honestly wouldn't mess with again. You know, they messed him up before, but now Soul Society has grown weak and complacent in the modern day. And I think everyone would just love to see these guys. Now, of course, the only 2 of the 13 captains we actually know are Yamamoto and Unohana, and based on how they used to be, you can imagine what the rest of these guys are probably like. Now, I feel like there's probably some Zero Division guys in there, Because you have to assume that Ichibei maybe was there at some point. That would make a lot of sense before being moved on up. Same with Nimaya. I don't think we should... If we see these characters at all, I do not think we should use the silhouettes we have as a basis to go off. I don't think that's going to be... I don't think that's going to be reliable, essentially. I think Kubo will probably create brand new characters for this. He might use some of the outlines, I don't know, but I just think it's not something we should fixate on too much. I think we would get a whole new character designs, but that's potentially asking for an awful lot to find out all of these original guys, but I just know I would love anything on that ancient Gote. I think it would be so awesome to see, and you know, clearly they are here in hell. Kyoraku mentions that the funeral festival is an ancient tradition. It dates back to a long time ago. So you can only assume these guys are probably stewing in hell, and they've been there for a long time. So if my theory about Szayelaporro's black skeletal arm being overtime degradation, these guys are going to look full-on demonic, and I would love to see it. But that's it for my video, guys. The top 10 characters I would love to see resurrected in hell in the potential new arc of Bleach. But of course, let me know in the comments below if you agree with my picks, if you'd like to see these characters come back at all, if there are some characters you think I missed off the list, and also I'd love to know what your opinion is on Ulquiorra and Baragon, the issue I brought up at the very start of the video. Do you think there's a chance we could see them or not? As always, guys, let me know all of that and more in the comments below. Hit subscribe if you haven't done already, and until next time, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.